Allow us to be old and reminisce just for a minute as we take you down a list of things gamers will never really get again. Some aspects of gaming have just disappeared from the mainstream, and you know what? We're gonna talk about them. Starting off with number 10, let's talk about memory cards. To sound really old, I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember memory cards, but they kind of sucked looking back. Having all of your previous game saves on this very easily losable plastic rectangle was terrifying. Every time you'd visit a friend and bring over your memory card, you protect it like it was your own child. There were a lot of things that could happen. It could get lost between the commute to your friend's house, it could get misplaced there, or you could take home the wrong memory card if you didn't put your name on it and you couldn't play anything because your saves were miles away. Or you could get caught in the middle of a flash flood hurricane, I don't know, like a million things could happen. When you were young, your imagination would go to the worst places. At the time, the jump from either the password system or like little weak onboard storage, memory cards did seem like a good idea, but now we have full onboard storage, hard drives, and even cloud saves. So the days of having to keep your saves really well guarded are over. Rest in peace, memory cards. Now next at number 9, another wild blast from the past was renting a console, going to a Blockbuster, paying money, and temporarily getting anything from a Super Nintendo, a Sega Genesis, even up to like PlayStation 2. Perfect example, say you didn't own a PlayStation 2, but you really wanted to play through Final Fantasy X over a really long weekend, Blockbuster had your back. You would just go in, you'd put down a deposit depending on the policies, and throw down a relatively low fee, and that sad dude behind the blue counter would grab you a big black ballistic case filled with a PlayStation and the game you want. And like we said too, it spanned a while. This wasn't some short-lived promotional thing. They did this for years. You could rent Nintendo 64s, Sega Saturns, Genesis, Game Boys. You could even rent a big dumb Virtual Boy at one time. It was a really cool thing to see, and we can totally see how that model doesn't really work anymore for most companies, but shit, it was cool. Now at number 8, while most households have more than one TV, if you're fortunate, there was a time when there was a TV in the living room and that was it. And the whole family would share that one TV. This obviously made playing video games pretty hard. You'd only get a short amount of time to play in between your parents using the TV, and if you had siblings, you'd have to fight them for the TV too. And chances are, your parents just didn't get it. You'd be in the middle of a boss battle or watching a super important cutscene, and then they'd demand the TV, and they didn't understand how important that part of the game was, and you couldn't just pause it or save it or turn it off, but they wanted to watch Jeopardy or the news or whatever. Thankfully now, things have changed. I don't know what it is. TVs are available more. Maybe the prices have been lower. A lot of us are spoiled. On average, the number of TVs in homes has increased. Some people might still experience this problem, and if you do, shout out to you. You're the real champ. Good luck out there. Keep fighting the good fight. Next at number 7, while everything now is totally backlit, it wasn't always that way. Take the Game Boy, for example. There wasn't backlighting on a Game Boy until the Game Boy SP. Before that, you had to make sure that wherever you were playing was really well lit with good lighting. I'm sure a lot of you remember playing Pokemon while driving in the car with your parents at night, taking in every bit of street light the car would pass, waiting until you were right underneath it to make the big move. The Sega Game Gear did have a backlit screen, but that thing used so much damn power that you pretty much had to play it plugged into the wall half the time. So it was pretty much a non-portable game console as far as a lot of us were concerned. But I remember when the Game Boy Advance SP came out, it was the most amazing thing, knowing that I didn't have to use a flashlight to play my Game Boy anymore. Next at number 6, wow, it feels like it was a million years ago, but video games at one point actually came with full-fledged instruction manuals, and they had a lot of information in there. Sometimes lots of really cool art, bright colors, good photographs, character bios. Nowadays, it's really just a piece of paper telling you to go to their website or just advertising a season pass or something. But they used to be thick, colorful, and they had everything, and they even had a section for notes in the back where you could like write down all your cheat codes or whatever. The Resident Evil instruction manuals actually had the character's blood type. That's how much information they gave you. Not only did they have bios and lore and stuff like that, but some of them had comic books. Metal Gear Solid 2 comes to mind. Some of the original versions of Resident Evil 2 came with stickers inside the instruction manual. They were just like mini treasure chests of video game stuff. Of course, now in 2019, you can get all this information from the internet or Wikipedia, but there was something so special about reading that whole manual before actually getting home and starting to play. Just good times. This might also sound weird too, but they were really good for toilet reading. Now at number 5, let's talk about multiplayer. Modern multiplayer is amazing. Getting to play something on Xbox Live or Steam or whatever and have a fully connected, coordinated gameplay and chat with people who can be on the other side of the world is a momentous achievement, and I'm really glad the medium is where it is. We gotta give props. That said, it can be easy to forget that prior to Xbox Live in the early mid-2000s, playing multiplayer games meant dragging someone's ass into the same room and sitting right next to each other to play locally, at least if you were a console gamer. And I gotta say, if the cries for couch co-op on more and more modern games is any indicator, it's a thing that people still miss to this day. Just cramming on one couch. I don't know, there's really something great about being able to just dunk on the person right next to you after beating them in Halo or GoldenEye or whatever, or getting to communicate in person on a more co-op heavy game. Granted, this often meant having a bunch of people crowding around one TV, huddled pretty close together due to the cable length, so things got a little more intimate at times, but man, what a time that was. But at number 4, if we're talking about things we really miss, we gotta talk about demo discs. Sometimes they would ship with a magazine, sometimes they would just be available at a store, they would come with random things, and they were really awesome, especially if you didn't have a lot of money or if you just didn't have a lot of games. It was a big deal because you weren't able to download demos off of like PSN or Xbox Live or Steam or Origin or whatever. You just had to wait for these demo discs. The PlayStation Underground ones were always dope. And then there were also weird ones like the Pizza Hut demo discs, which actually I'm pretty sure had Metal Gear Solid on it. Like I said, a lot of us couldn't just get a bunch of games all the time, so we were just stuck replaying demos over and over again. There were some demos I could beat with my eyes closed and I obsessed over. The amount of times I ran through the Oddworld Abe's Odyssey demo that was on like a PlayStation Underground disc is unreal. It's actually kind of pathetic. But we never see him anymore. The last time we saw a demo disc, interestingly enough, was in the PlayStation VR bundle, and that felt like a huge novelty. Rest in peace. Now at number 3, I feel like we've been spoiled by this current generation of consoles, but it wasn't that long ago that we were still dealing with wired controllers on the reg. I mean, hell, even the original Xbox 360 had a wired controller you can get, which, by the way, was actually the secret best PC controller for a long time, but that's neither here nor there. Having wires for everything was rough, looking back at it, but it definitely didn't help that the cables were never quite right. They were either way too long and messy, or just short enough to be inconvenient, resulting in you plopping your console on the floor so the controller could reach your couch or your bed or whatever, or just, resigning to the bad cord length and just sitting on the floor staring up at the TV. That's just not really a thing anymore. And of course, that's not even getting into the super common problem of having someone walk through the room and either yanking the controller out of your hand or jerking the console itself across the room. It was always an international crisis. It was a bad scene. And you know what? Thank God for this wireless future. Now at number 2, we gotta talk about something very near and dear to our heart, because if I'm being honest, and I'm sure a lot of people here are, if we didn't have a lot of these back in the day, we probably wouldn't have been as inspired as we are to do the things we do now for our job every day. Before we had a ton of video game websites that you all hate, and Twitter and YouTube channels and all that stuff, you got your latest gaming news from monthly gaming magazines. And man, there were some awesome ass video game magazines. You'd walk into pretty much any big store, like a grocery store or a pharmacy or a bookstore or whatever, and they'd have a magazine rack with tons of magazines for you to choose from, and the gaming section always had tons. You had classics like Electronic Gaming Monthly, EGM, Nintendo Power, Official Xbox Magazine, Games for Windows, GamePro, multiple PC gaming magazines. The list really goes on and on. Now, we've still got Edge and we've got Game Informer now, but with social media and the whole internet news cycle that goes so fast, you don't really get the same rush of seeing what the hottest news was that month, which is a bummer, because in some ways it was kind of better, at least for getting excited as a young kid. But now, of course, we're all super hyper informed of everything constantly thanks to current technology. But finally, down to number 1, we gotta talk about cheat codes and cheat devices, because back in the day, cheat codes were just like the thing, and a total given on most games. You wanna get that awesome blood mode for Mortal Kombat? You better be ready to punch in A, B, A, C, A, B, B, and have Scorpion yell at you so you can see the good shit. The same goes for getting sick weapon loadouts in Doom, or getting all sorts of weird and wild shit to happen in up to Grand Theft Auto 3. I remember going to bookstores and school book fairs and stuff and seeing and occasionally buying some of those like 1001 video game cheat code books, and then getting home and realizing that I only had like 3 games featured in the whole book, but hey, didn't matter. I kept buying those dumb cheat code books. And for the games that didn't have the cheats you wanted, well, they had you covered for that too. If you wanted to take it a step further, you could just slap a Game Genie or a Game Shark, or even in more recent years, an Action Replay, slap it right on that console, and you could bend those games to your will and just go crazy with it. You could do some wild stuff with those cheat devices, and sometimes it would totally break the game. It was so cool, and it was an awesome time. Games still often have cheat codes, but you don't see it anywhere near as much these days, and it's super disappointing. Still, it's fun to look back and miss some of the great things from gaming. Maybe not all great, but definitely unique. Those are 10 things we think gamers will never really get again, but we want to hear from you guys in the comments. What do you remember? Maybe you're an older gamer, maybe you're a younger gamer. You probably have some interesting perspectives, so we want to hear from you guys down in the comments. But if you enjoyed this video with a trip down memory lane, clicking the like button helps us out a ton. We really appreciate that. But if you're new, you should consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell like we always say, because we put out videos every single day. But did that rhyme? Jeez, sorry. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.